From the moment humans began to ask questions they could not answer, they began to invent stories that filled the silence, the rustle in the dark, the thunder in the sky, the sickness that came without warning. These mysteries created fear, and fear demanded an explanation. But instead of seeking evidence, early people turned to imagination. They personified the unknown, giving it faces, voices, and rules. Out of this process, religion was born, not as truth, but as the most convenient illusion. When we look at the earliest human societies, religion is always present, but not because it is true. It was simply the first tool to make chaos feel less threatening. A hunter-gatherer community struck by a lightning storm could not explain electricity, so they said the gods were angry. A family that lost a child could not explain disease, so they said an invisible spirit had taken them. Every unexplained event was turned into a story that relieved anxiety, even if it created new chains of fear. The delusion of religion begins with the belief that ignorance equals revelation. Instead of admitting they did not know, people convinced themselves that they knew through the supernatural. This is the oldest human mistake, to confuse a comforting answer with a correct one. And this mistake became so ingrained in culture that entire civilizations rose and fell while holding on to it. When agriculture began, religion transformed into a system of control. Suddenly, there were crops to protect, seasons to predict, and hierarchies to enforce. Priests appeared, claiming they could read the will of the gods. They convinced farmers that a good harvest depended not only on rain, but also on obedience. Obedience to rituals, obedience to sacrifices, and most importantly, obedience to them. The delusion grew roots, not only in belief, but in power. Archaeological evidence from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley shows that temples were often the largest structures in a city. They were not built for shelter or science. They were built as monuments to invisible beings. Resources that could have gone into irrigation, medicine, or exploration were diverted into appeasing gods that never answered. Religion drained human effort away from progress and into maintaining the illusion. Some argue that religion gave people comfort and social cohesion, but comfort built on delusion is not stability, it is dependency. A drug can calm anxiety, but it does not cure the disease. In the same way, religion soothed fears but left ignorance intact. Worse, it taught people to avoid the pursuit of knowledge. If everything is already explained by gods, then there is no need to question. That is how the delusion perpetuated itself across thousands of years. One of the clearest examples is the way religion explained natural disasters. Ancient people in the Mediterranean believed earthquakes were caused by gods stomping their feet underground. In Japan, myths told of giant catfish shaking the earth. These stories did not prevent earthquakes, they did not save lives, but they gave the illusion of control. If people prayed or performed rituals, maybe the gods would stop. Meanwhile, science had not yet been born to reveal tectonic plates, fault lines, and the physics of seismic waves. The delusion kept people passive in the face of danger. What makes religion so powerful as a delusion is not just that it explains what people do not understand. It also exploits human psychology. Humans are naturally pattern seekers. Our brains evolved to connect events because seeing patterns helped our ancestors survive. If a rustle in the grass often meant a predator, assuming a predator every time was safer than ignoring it. But this same instinct created false positives. People saw meaning where none existed. A drought followed by a ritual could look like cause and effect, even if it was coincidence. The human brain made the leap, and religion rewarded it. Psychologists call this agent detection bias. When something unusual happens, people assume there must be an intentional agent behind it. This bias helped early humans survive in the wild, but it also led them to populate the world with invisible beings. Every gust of wind was a spirit, every shadow was a ghost, every dream was a message, and instead of correcting the bias with reason, religion amplified it. The delusion also grows stronger because it exploits another weakness in human psychology: the fear of death. No matter how strong or intelligent a person is, the thought of ceasing to exist is terrifying. Religion offered a solution by inventing afterlives. It told people they would meet loved ones again. It promised justice after death for the wrongs of life. But these promises came with no evidence. They were designed not to reflect reality, but to silence fear. This is why nearly every religion has an afterlife narrative. It is not proof of truth, it is proof of how universal the fear of death is. This raises a striking point. If religion were true, its details should align across cultures. Instead, they contradict each other completely. Egyptians believed in weighing the heart against a feather. Vikings imagined Valhalla. Hindus believed in reincarnation. Christians spoke of heaven and hell. These are not different perspectives on the same truth. They are mutually exclusive stories. Their variety alone shows they are inventions, shaped by culture, geography, and imagination. The persistence of religion shows how difficult it is to escape an ancient delusion once it takes root. Even as science began to answer real questions, explaining diseases with germs, explaining the cosmos with physics, explaining evolution with biology, religion fought to maintain its grip. The delusion was never about truth. It was about power, comfort, and identity. And so, it resisted every attempt to be replaced by evidence. To this day, billions still hold on to beliefs that began in the minds of people who did not know what lightning was, who thought the earth was the center of the universe, who believed sickness was caused by spirits. The ideas of those people echo in modern societies, not because they were right, but because the delusion became tradition. The weight of tradition is heavy enough to feel like truth, even when it is not. And so, religion survives, not as knowledge, but as one of humanity's oldest errors, passed down generation after generation. It began as a survival mechanism, evolved into a tool of control, and persists today as a deeply ingrained habit of thought. It is humanity's oldest delusion, not because it is profound, but because it has been repeated for so long that repetition itself became evidence. The power of a delusion is not only in the story itself, but in how it reshapes behavior. Religion taught people to act against their own instincts, to kill when otherwise they might show mercy, to obey when otherwise they might rebel, to sacrifice their best resources when otherwise they might preserve them. This is what makes it more dangerous than simple superstition. Superstition might make a person throw salt over their shoulder, but religion made entire civilizations burn human beings alive to please gods that never existed. History is filled with rituals of sacrifice, each one a grim example of how deep the delusion can go. The Aztecs tore the hearts out of captives to keep the sun rising. The Canaanites offered children to Moloch, burning them alive. Ancient Greeks drowned horses for Poseidon. None of these practices produced rain, fertility, or calm seas. Yet they continued because the people believed that the gods demanded it. A delusion is powerful when it convinces people that cruelty is virtue. The same mechanism appears in every major religion. Acts that are naturally immoral become redefined as sacred if done for a deity. Wars become holy. Executions become divine justice. Prejudice becomes righteousness. The delusion rewires morality itself, so people no longer ask whether something is good or evil, but whether it pleases or offends a god. That is why religion can make good people do terrible things without hesitation. Even when religion does not demand blood, it demands submission. Entire systems of social hierarchy were justified by divine will. In ancient Egypt, Pharaoh was not just a ruler, but a god incarnate. In medieval Europe, kings claimed divine right. In India, caste was sanctified by religious law. These structures did not arise by accident. Religion created them and reinforced them. And because they were presented as divine, people accepted them without challenge. The delusion of religion allowed inequality to be written into the fabric of society, giving oppression a sacred shield. Some defenders of religion say it encouraged art and architecture, but this too was built on delusion. The soaring cathedrals, the intricate temples, the massive pyramids, these were monuments, not to human achievement, but to human fear of gods. They consumed wealth and labor from the poor, who believed their sacrifices would secure blessings. Beauty does not justify the lie. If people today were forced to build monuments out of fear of invisible beings, we would call it exploitation. The delusion does not become noble because the architecture is impressive. Religion also froze societies in outdated moral codes. The texts considered sacred are full of rules written for tribes living thousands of years ago. Yet, people still treat them as if they hold eternal truth. These codes forbid harmless acts, regulate personal behavior, and enforce discrimination. Entire communities have been shamed, ostracized, or punished Because ancient texts declared their identities sinful, the delusion of religion turns old prejudices into timeless commandments. Consider how religion treats curiosity. In many societies, questioning sacred stories was punishable by death. The very act of asking for evidence was branded as heresy. Thinkers who challenged the delusion were silenced, exiled, or executed. Socrates was condemned for corrupting the youth with dangerous ideas. Hypatia of Alexandria, one of the earliest female mathematicians, was murdered by a Christian mob. Giordano Bruno was burned alive for suggesting that stars were suns with their own planets. The delusion could not tolerate doubt, because doubt exposes its weakness. Even when religion was forced to coexist with science, it always lagged behind, retreating only when evidence made resistance impossible. The earth was not flat, yet the church fought against those who showed otherwise. The earth was not the center of the universe, yet Galileo was punished for proving it. Diseases were not caused by demons, yet people accused of witchcraft were tortured and killed. Again and again, the delusion stood in the way of progress, forcing humanity to walk slower toward truth. One of the clearest signs of delusion is when predictions fail, yet belief persists. Throughout history, countless prophets claimed the world would end on a specific date. None of them were right. From early Christians who expected Jesus to return within their lifetime, to modern cult leaders predicting doomsday, the failures pile up endlessly. Yet, people continue to follow new prophets, convinced that this time will be different. A belief that survives every failed prediction is not truth. It is delusion. Religion also exploits guilt and shame. It convinces people that their natural impulses are wicked, that their thoughts are sins, that they are born flawed. From childhood, people are taught that they are guilty before they even act. This manufactured guilt keeps them dependent on the very system that created the problem. Religion invents the disease of sin, then sells the cure of salvation. No other delusion so effectively traps people in a cycle they cannot escape. Perhaps the most striking evidence that religion is a delusion is how it mirrors human culture rather than transcends it. Gods look like the people who imagine them. In Africa, gods have dark skin. In Europe, gods have light skin. In warlike societies, gods are violent. In peaceful tribes, gods are gentle. If gods were real, their nature would be consistent. Instead, they change with human needs. This is not revelation, it is projection. Religion is humanity speaking to itself and mistaking the echo for divine voice. Even within a single religion, the contradictions reveal its human origin. Different sects read the same sacred text, but draw opposite conclusions. They fight wars over interpretations of words that none of them can prove. If the truth were divine, it would not depend on translation, culture, or opinion. The endless disagreements are not evidence of depth, but evidence that the foundation itself is an illusion. The persistence of religion shows how a delusion can become self-reinforcing. Parents teach children, communities enforce conformity, rituals create emotional attachment. By the time an individual can think critically, the delusion feels like part of their identity. To question it feels like tearing away a piece of themselves. That is why people defend religion with such passion, even when evidence against it is overwhelming. It is not about truth anymore, it is about self-preservation. This makes religion unlike most errors. If someone believes the earth is flat, evidence can eventually change their mind. But if someone believes a God will punish them eternally for doubting, they have a reason to cling to the delusion no matter what. Fear locks the door that evidence tries to open. This is why religion can last for thousands of years, while other false ideas eventually die out. It is designed to resist correction. Religion is often defended on the grounds that it provides meaning, but meaning that depends on illusion is fragile. If a person's sense of purpose is built on stories that cannot be verified, then that purpose is always at risk of collapse. True meaning does not require belief in invisible beings. It comes from the real connections people build, the knowledge they uncover, and the progress they create. Yet religion teaches that meaning must come from beyond the human, as if human life were not enough on its own. This devalues reality in favor of fantasy. The illusion becomes clearer when you examine how religions adapt to survive. Whenever science closes one gap, religion shifts its claims into another. At one time, gods controlled the weather. Later, gods retreated into the creation of life. Then, when evolution explained life, gods were pushed into the origin of the universe. This pattern is well known as the God of the Gaps. The delusion survives not by proving itself, but by constantly shrinking into the unknown. It thrives only where evidence is absent. If religion were true, it would not need to retreat. Its claims would remain consistent no matter how much evidence accumulated. Instead, history shows the opposite. Every century of discovery reduces the territory of the divine. The more we learn, the less religion has to say. Yet the delusion endures because people prefer a shrinking God to no God at all. The illusion is less frightening than the void of uncertainty. The persistence of this delusion also explains why morality is so often misunderstood. People are taught that morality comes from religion, when in fact, morality comes from human empathy and cooperation. Evidence from anthropology shows that fairness, reciprocity, and compassion existed in societies long before organized religion codified them. Hunter-gatherer tribes punished cheaters and rewarded generosity, not because gods commanded it, but because survival depended on it. Religion hijacked these natural instincts and claimed ownership of them. This is why religious morality so often contradicts human morality. Ancient texts permit slavery, justify conquest, and treat women as property. Yet religious leaders insist these texts are the source of all goodness. The truth is simpler. Humans evolved morality, and religion distorted it. Religion tells people that they are good only if they obey divine rules, but people are capable of goodness without them. In fact, the most moral acts are those done without expectation of reward or fear of punishment. Modern psychology provides further proof that religion is unnecessary for morality. Secular societies consistently rank higher in measures of well-being, equality, and compassion. Countries with low levels of religious belief often have lower crime rates, better health care, and higher education. This is not coincidence. It shows that when people are free from the delusion, they can build societies based on reason and empathy, rather than fear of divine judgment. The delusion of religion also shows itself in how easily it bends to political power. Leaders throughout history have used religion to justify their rule. Wars of conquest are framed as holy missions. Taxation becomes tithing. Loyalty to the ruler is dressed up as loyalty to God. Even today, politicians invoke divine authority to win followers. Religion is a tool that adapts to any system of power, precisely because it was designed as one from the beginning. The gods are silent, so their voices can be claimed by anyone who wishes to control others. This adaptability explains why so many contradictory religions exist side by side. Each one is shaped by the needs of its culture. In agrarian societies, gods are linked to fertility and harvests. In nomadic tribes, gods are warriors and shepherds. In modern industrial nations, gods become vague and abstract, more about personal spirituality than specific rituals. This flexibility is not a sign of truth, it is a sign of invention. The delusion changes form to survive in new environments, just as a myth adapts in the telling. Another feature of delusion is the inability to admit error. In science, when an idea is disproven, it is abandoned. In religion, when an idea is disproven, it is reinterpreted. Sacred texts that clearly state falsehoods are defended with metaphor, allegory, or selective reading. This is not pursuit of truth, it is damage control. When a belief system must constantly rewrite itself to survive, it is not a revelation, it is a myth clinging to life. Religion also undermines human dignity by teaching that people are powerless without gods. It tells them they are weak, sinful, and incapable of directing their own lives. It insists that meaning, morality, and even existence itself depend on divine will. This strips people of autonomy and hands it over to unseen forces. The delusion is not just belief in gods, it is belief in human inferiority, and that belief has crippled human confidence for millennia. The psychological cost of this delusion is enormous. Children raised in fear of eternal punishment often carry anxiety, guilt, and shame into adulthood. People who are told their natural desires are sinful suffer unnecessary self-hatred. Entire communities are divided by doctrines that create insiders and outsiders, chosen and damned. Religion does not just mislead, it damages often in ways that last a lifetime. Some argue that religion provides comfort in suffering, but Comfort that depends on falsehood is not strength. When someone believes a God is watching over them, it may calm their fear, but it does not change the reality of their situation. True strength comes from confronting reality, not escaping into illusion. The comfort of religion is like the comfort of a dream, pleasant, but gone the moment one wakes up. The persistence of this dream across thousands of years is not evidence of its truth. It is evidence of how deeply fear and hope can shape the human mind. Fear of death, fear of chaos, fear of meaninglessness. These are the raw materials from which religion is built. Hope for justice, hope for reunion with the dead, hope for eternal life. These are the rewards that keep the delusion alive. But fear and hope are not evidence. They are emotions. And emotions can be powerful enough to sustain illusions for millennia. If religion were true, it would not need to rely on fear or hope. It would present evidence. It would stand up to scrutiny. It would not require faith, which is just another word for belief without proof. Faith is the very essence of delusion because it elevates conviction above reality. It asks people to ignore their senses, their reason, and their doubts, and to accept stories because authority says so. That is not a path to truth. That is surrender to illusion. The greatest tragedy of this delusion is how much potential it has wasted. Countless minds throughout history were never free to explore, to question, or to create because they were shackled by belief. Countless discoveries were delayed because people were taught not to look beyond sacred stories. Countless lives were lost in wars fought over whose delusion was the correct one. The cost of religion is not just measured in rituals and prayers, but in centuries of human progress stolen away. The resilience of religion shows how well a delusion can mimic truth. It offers explanations, even when wrong. It offers comfort, even when false. It offers community, even when built on fear. But none of these make it real. The human brain is capable of believing almost anything if it satisfies emotional needs. And religion is the ultimate satisfaction machine, built to answer questions with certainty, even when that certainty is empty. One reason the delusion endures is ritual. Ritual bypasses logic and goes straight to emotion. Singing, chanting, kneeling, fasting, and feasting. These acts bind people together and create powerful feelings of unity. But those feelings are then attributed to gods rather than to human psychology. Neuroscience shows that shared rituals release oxytocin, a hormone that strengthens social bonds. People mistake the chemical effects of their own brains for the presence of the divine. Religion uses biology to reinforce illusion. Another reason is storytelling. Humans are natural storytellers, and religion provides some of the most enduring narratives in history. Stories of creation, redemption, punishment, and salvation are emotionally gripping. They give people a sense of drama, of being part of a cosmic play. But powerful stories are not the same as truth. A novel can move someone to tears without being factual. Religion confuses emotional impact with evidence. The delusion becomes clear when we see how different religions contradict each other, yet claim absolute truth. Christianity says salvation comes only through Jesus. Islam says it comes only through submission to Allah. Hinduism speaks of reincarnation, Buddhism of liberation from the cycle, Judaism of covenant with one God. These claims cannot all be true, but each religion insists it is the only truth. This is a hallmark of delusion, the refusal to recognize contradiction, even when it is obvious. The survival of religion also depends on indoctrination. Few people choose their faith after careful examination of evidence. Most inherit it from their parents and community. Studies show that the vast majority of believers follow the religion of their birthplace. A child born in Saudi Arabia is overwhelmingly likely to become Muslim. A child born in Italy is overwhelmingly likely to become Catholic. If religion were about truth, its distribution would not follow geography so predictably. It follows culture, because it is culture. Education exposes the weakness of the delusion. When people are taught critical thinking, comparative religion, and science, belief tends to decline. This is why some religious systems resist education, censor books, and discourage questioning. They sense the fragility of their own foundations. A truth does not fear investigation, but a delusion does. And religion shows its fear every time it demands blind faith, bans criticism, or punishes doubt. The illusion also hides in language. Religious phrases become so common that people stop questioning them. Words like blessing, miracle, and sacred create an aura of mystery that makes ordinary events seem divine. A child surviving an accident becomes a miracle, while thousands who die unnoticed are ignored. This selective attribution reinforces the illusion that gods are at work, even when the evidence is simply randomness and probability. Religion also thrives on uncertainty. Whenever science does not yet have an answer, religion rushes in with its own. Consciousness, the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning of physical constants, these are genuine mysteries. But mystery is not proof of gods. It is proof that there is more to learn. Religion, however, cannot tolerate unanswered questions, so it fills the gaps with divine claims. This is why it remains humanity's oldest delusion. It is built on impatience with not knowing. The delusion is revealed most clearly in prayer. Billions of prayers are said every day for healing, protection, and success. Yet when studied statistically, prayer shows no measurable effect beyond chance. Sick people prayed for recover at the same rate as those not prayed for. Disasters kill the faithful and the faithless alike. Victories in war are claimed as divine favor, even though both sides prayed for success. The evidence is overwhelming. Prayer does nothing. But the delusion survives because people remember the few coincidences that match their hopes and forget the countless failures. Religion also survives by redefining failure as mystery. When prayers go unanswered, believers are told that gods work in mysterious ways. This explanation is not an explanation at all. It is a way to protect the illusion from reality. No matter what happens, whether good or bad, it is always interpreted as divine will. This makes religion unfalsifiable, and unfalsifiable beliefs are the essence of delusion. The psychological tricks that sustain religion are the same tricks seen in cults: isolation from opposing ideas, repetition of doctrine, emotional highs followed by guilt, promises of reward and threats of punishment. These are not signs of truth. They are signs of manipulation. Religion is simply the oldest and most successful cult, one that expanded until it became mainstream. But its methods are identical to any smaller cult that demands unquestioning loyalty. Technology has exposed the weakness of religion more clearly than ever. With access to global information, people can compare myths, see contradictions, and examine evidence. This is why in many modern societies, religious belief is declining. The delusion can only thrive in isolation, but isolation is vanishing. When people see how many different gods exist, they begin to realize how likely it is that all of them are human inventions. Yet the decline is uneven. In places where poverty, instability, and fear dominate, religion continues to thrive. This shows that religion is not about truth, but about human need. Where life is uncertain, people cling to illusions that promise order and protection. The delusion feeds on suffering, offering hope without evidence. And as long as suffering exists, religion finds fertile ground to survive. This is why religion often resists social progress. The more secure and just a society becomes, the less people depend on illusions. So, religious institutions fight against changes that would reduce fear, better education, better healthcare, equality for marginalized groups. They fear these changes because they remove the psychological fuel that religion depends on. The delusion is strongest where people feel weakest. The greatest evidence that religion is a delusion is its adaptability to failure. Every time its claims collapse, it reshapes itself. No flood came when predicted. It was metaphor. No miracle occurred when promised. It was symbolic. No savior returned when expected. It was spiritual, not literal. Religion survives not by being true, but by refusing to admit it is false. That is the very definition of delusion, the refusal to let reality correct belief. The mark of an old delusion is how deeply it seeps into every aspect of life. Religion shapes politics, morality, art, and even identity. Yet when examined closely, it has no foundation in evidence. It survives not because it is true, but because it has been repeated long enough to feel true. Repetition has replaced proof, tradition has replaced reason, and fear has replaced curiosity. The clearest way to see this is to look at what religion demands. It demands belief without evidence. It demands obedience without understanding. It demands loyalty without question. These demands are not the hallmarks of truth. They are the hallmarks of control. A truth invites investigation. A delusion punishes it. Religion thrives precisely because it demands what truth never would. Across history, every major advance in human knowledge has chipped away at religion. The earth is not flat. The universe does not revolve around us. Species are not fixed, but evolve. Diseases are not curses, but natural processes. Rain does not come from prayer, but from evaporation and condensation. Each discovery erodes the territory of gods, yet the belief survives, clinging to whatever gaps remain. This survival is not proof of strength. It is proof of stubbornness. The power of religion lies in its ability to disguise itself as virtue. It claims to be about love, but divides humanity into chosen and damned. It claims to be about peace, but blesses wars. It claims to be about truth, but silences questions. It claims to be about humility, but insists the universe was made for us. These contradictions do not weaken religion in the eyes of its followers, because the delusion shields them from seeing. Clearly, they are taught to redefine contradictions as mysteries, cruelty as justice, and ignorance as faith. The delusion is sustained by fear of what comes after. No matter how much evidence shows that life is finite, people cling to the promise of eternity. Death is the one experience none of us can avoid, and religion exploits that fear with precision. It tells people that their choices now will echo forever. It frightens them with eternal punishment and seduces them with eternal reward. This is the ultimate trap of the delusion. It convinces people to trade the only life they know they have for the hope of one that has never been proven. But the evidence of history shows that humanity does not need religion to flourish. The greatest achievements, medicine, technology, human rights, art, and science, have advanced not because of religion, but in spite of it. Where people are free to think without fear of divine punishment, they discover more, create more, and live more fully. Where religion loosens its grip, literacy rises, life expectancy grows, and compassion expands beyond tribal boundaries. The real progress of humanity has always come from escaping delusion, not clinging to it. Religion claims to answer the biggest questions: where we came from, why we are here, and what happens when we die. But its answers collapse under scrutiny. Where we came from is explained by evolution, not myth. Why we are here is not dictated by gods, but created by ourselves through the lives we live. What happens when we die is not eternal judgment, but the return of our bodies to the universe that made us. These truths may not be as comforting as religious stories, but they are grounded in reality, and reality, unlike delusion, can be trusted. What makes religion humanity's oldest delusion is not just that it began in ignorance, it is that it refuses to let ignorance go. Long after we gain the tools to answer questions honestly, religion insists on keeping the old stories alive. It does not matter how many times it has been disproven, how many contradictions it contains, or how much harm it has caused. The delusion continues because people would rather hold on to illusions than face uncertainty. Yet uncertainty is not weakness. It is honesty. To admit we do not know is the first step toward discovery. To ask without assuming, to seek without bias, to value evidence over tradition, these are the qualities that lead to truth. Religion teaches that doubt is dangerous, but doubt is the beginning of wisdom. The refusal to question is what keeps people chained to delusion. The oldest delusion of humanity is also the most seductive because it speaks to our deepest fears and hopes. But recognizing it for what it is does not leave us empty. It frees us. It frees us to find meaning in life itself, rather than in stories written in ignorance. It frees us to value morality for its real roots in empathy and cooperation. It frees us to see the universe not as a stage for human drama, but as a vast reality we are privileged to explore. When the weight of delusion is lifted, what remains is not despair, but clarity. Life becomes more precious, not less, when we accept its limits. Justice becomes more urgent, not less, when we know it must be achieved here and now, not deferred to an afterlife. Knowledge becomes more valuable, not less, when we realize it is our only guide. And freedom becomes more profound, when we understand that no invisible master dictates our fate. Religion may be humanity's oldest delusion, but it does not have to be our future. The future belongs to those willing to face reality, to embrace uncertainty, and to seek truth no matter how difficult. Delusions may comfort, but only truth can build a world worth living in.